And welcome to Thrift Shop Biography. This is the one about Richard Branson. Thank you for listening. Hello, Cleo.
Hello, Richard.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. What have you been reading this week?
I've been reading Richard Branson's autobiography, his first one, called it Losing My Virginity.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is one of those monstrously huge books. It's about 550 pages. I have to say, though, I didn't expect to feel like this, but after 550 pages, I would have happily moved on to the second book, because I absolutely loved reading this book.
Yeah. I was fascinated by it, and him, actually. And it actually made me realise how much I liked him, but I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of been, like, for people our age, he's always kind of been part of the fabric of England, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has, yeah. He's like a national business treasure.
Yeah, he really is. And when I think about it, he's always been very smiley, very positive, very enthusiastic.
Yeah.
And then I kind of thought as I was reading this, oh, actually, I really like him.
Yeah, me too.
But I guess because he's not a pop star or a film star, you don't really think about him in that way.
No, but then he's always doing cameos. So he was on Friends, wasn't he? The wedding episode. He popped up when they were in London.
Was he really?
Yeah, and he was in Spice World, with the Spice Girls. And, you know, he's always...
He's in all the classics.
Yeah, those are the greatest things. Oh, very highbrow. No, they are, aren't they? But he's a game for a laugh. You know, he's good sport.
Oh, yeah.
Plus, I don't know if he was world news, but for British people, he was always in the news for everything he did. You know, breaking all the records with the ballooning and all of that stuff.
Oh, that's interesting, actually. I don't know if his fame has travelled outside of England. If anybody is listening who isn't familiar with him, how would you describe Richard Branson to them?
Well, a businessman, but like a hippie businessman. That's how I would, that's in a nutshell, isn't it?
Yeah, but if we mentioned Virgin yet?
No.
So that's his, like, fleet of businesses come under the Virgin banner. So if people haven't heard particularly of Richard Branson, they've probably heard of Virgin Records, Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Megastore, Virgin bloody everything.
Virgin bloody everything. It's incredible by the end of the book, and he sort of goes through it. And it's even Virgin Galactic.
Yeah, right.
I had to Google it because I didn't somehow realise that space tourism is actually currently happening.
What, can you already go?
Yeah, it's Virgin Galactic. That's his actual company, and I think they've already done 12 commercial flights to the moon.
What, it's operational?
Yeah, I know. Somehow I didn't know this, but I don't watch enough news, so I thought that was just me.
I thought it was all still in the research stage.
No. It's about £500,000 to go to the moon.
Okay, so do you want to go once we've monetised this podcast?
Yeah. I'm not sure I do, actually, no. Because everything he dabbles in is highly dangerous. If you're sort of half suicidal, brilliant, go. But if you're not, you know, I don't think I would. I'll just watch Star Trek in 3D at the cinema or something. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, what a life to have ended up in selling it, being a hippie student to running space travel. It's absolutely nuts.
So shall we get into the life of this fantastic entrepreneurial man?
Yes.
Little Richard Branson.
Little Richard, but not that one.
Little Richard. We've just done another. We just did Richard Pryor.
Yeah, very, very different. Not to be confused.
Did Richard Branson not set himself on fire?
Well, actually, pretty much didn't he? Set his balloon on fire.
Actually, yeah, he might have done.
He easily might have, but
he
anyway.
wasn't on heroin when he did it.
No, he had his own kind of heroin, which was adrenaline.
Yeah.
Oh my God, he essentially has the same character. He's just channeled it into business.
Yeah, for sure.
He's addicted to the buzz. It isn't the same character at all. It's not self-destructive. It's self-constructive.
Self-constructive, I like that.
Self-constructive behaviour. Yeah. Nobody ever accuses anyone of that. Until now. He was born in 1950 in Shamley Green, Surrey.
Sounds nice, doesn't it, Shamley Green?
Well, it does, actually. Where's Surrey?
It's near London, just
south of
Richmond
London?
and Kingston, yeah.
Oh, right, it's not that far away, is it?
Very nice, very posh.
Yeah, he's quite posh. Okay, so he had a nice upbringing. They weren't poor. They weren't minted rich either. The main thing...
They worked for it.
They worked for it. What I get from his past, his sort of relatives, is that they were really high achievers. His dad's dad was Scott of the Antarctic's cousin.
Yeah.
So he gets to go to see his granddad and get all these stories from the cousin that was the biggest and greatest adventurer of his time. And that was the thing, he says, they've all got a great sense of adventure.
Yeah.
And his mum's mum was a ballroom champion and a golf champion who hit a hole-in-one at the age of 90, and that was a record-breaking thing. They're record breakers.
Yeah.
Adventurous people.
Yeah, they are on both sides. And actually his aunties and stuff as well are all high achievers. And I think one of his aunties was friends with Douglas Bader, the World War II pilot who lost both his legs. And little Richard Branson would be hanging out with this guy who's a hero, a war hero, you know. So his whole childhood is surrounded by fantastic people who do stuff.
Achievers.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. He said they didn't even have TV. They just would always be out and about, helping out or making things or being productive. And then his dad was from 3 generations of lawyers and ended up going to Cambridge, but it wasn't for him. He didn't want to do it. And then when he was a young barrister, he met his wife, Richard's mother, Eve, and she was in the West End when she was 12 as an actress and a dancer. Yeah, and then she actually dressed up as a boy so she could become a pilot. She actually properly got away with that. And then in the war, she was a signaller. And then an air hostess when it was really glamorous to be one.
It says to be a air hostess, it says the qualifications, you had to be very pretty and unmarried.
Yeah.
Isn't that odd? Like, if you were married, you couldn't be an air hostess. Did they want to make that part of the experience, that there were all these pretty available girls in the air?
I have a feeling that to do any job once, you pretty much had to be young married as a woman. That's why you have to say Miss or Mrs.
Okay.
Because if you're married, you might not have as much freedom. But if you're young and single, you're not likely to get all trained up and then drop out and have kids.
Right, of course, because you have to travel as an air hostess, and they're just assuming if you're married to a man, the man won't let you, probably.
Part of that, yeah. But I really do think that was also common to many jobs.
Yeah.
I don't know, but anyway, it's another time.
See, now he says about their mum and dad, he says he doesn't think they ever had a crossword their entire lives.
Yeah.
And he says they adored each other. And they got married in 1949, and Richard Branson was conceived on their honeymoon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just all perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. And he said they were the sort of people who would have died for each other. They absolutely loved each other. He was growing up with so much love and security.
Oh, it's such relief to hear about a well-adjusted, loved child.
Yeah, it's nice. How unusual.
I know, right?
And then also they made their kids independent. They say things like, go on, get out of the car and make your own way home. Things like that, even though they're 4 miles away. Or, I'll get on your bike and cycle to Bournemouth, pack a lunch, give us a bell when you get there, sort of thing. A bit like, was it Vivienne Westwood did
Vivienne Westwood did that to her kids, yeah.
And we were shocked.
Yeah.
I'm no longer shocked.
I think when Vivienne Westwood's sons were like 10 and 12, she said, all right, you're going camping in France now. She just kicked them out of the house.
Yeah, off you go. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's a certain type of parenting.
Yeah, but it makes people really independent. The recipe is right there. You've got love, stability, sense of adventure, and genealogy is like achievers and adventurers.
Yeah.
Success.
Yeah, definitely.
So you're going to believe you can if they did.
Yeah. And I also thought, having 3 generations of lawyers on your dad's side is also really helpful for business.
Really helpful. Yeah, because he got in so much trouble over the years, and you've got people you can call to help you, haven't you? He's got a network.
Yeah.
But then, obviously he goes through the ordinary, posh, British hell of boarding school.
Oh, horrible.
Which is supposed to toughen you up because you get beaten for the rest of your childhood.
Yeah.
Beaten. Daily.
I wonder if that still goes on, it's so documented now, and so many middle-class men in particular are so messed up, and I believe that the Conservative government are just so awful because they all went through that in their younger years. I think it's a national outrage that one day will be properly addressed. And I'd hate to think it was still going on.
I would too, but I'd be amazed if it isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be that the teachers don't beat you, but I'd be amazed if the kids aren't beating each other up continuously. It's like prison for kids.
Yes, it is.
And the hierarchy that forms and stuff. It's institutionalised bullying. It's totally part of the fabric of, they think this will shape up the people. You either beat or get beaten, and those will be the people who rule. Those will be the people who go into accounting.
Yeah, it seems surprising. He talks so highly of his mum and dad, and they have such a nice family life, that it almost seems unfair that they would send him away to boarding school. But I think perhaps just for like middle class families back in the 1950s and 60s, if you have a certain amount of money, you have to keep up with the Joneses and give your kid a good education. And that was widely perceived to be at boarding school.
Yeah, and it's just what they did. 3 generations of lawyers, they would have all gone to boarding school.
Yeah.
And it did them no harm because they became lawyers. So he said, but then he stopped it because he said, I hated it so much, I swore I will never send my kids away, and I never did.
Yeah.
So he put a stop to it.
Good for him.
I can't help thinking he's one of the good guys. You can't help thinking it.
Yeah.
I know he's selling himself to us, but
yeah,
the evidence is here. It really is.
I know, but we've read enough of these books now, and people don't always sell themselves, or if they do, you sometimes read between the lines.
You can see through it sometimes, yeah. He's one of the good guys, isn't he?
I think he generally is. I mean, it is how he built his brand on being ethical and generous, and I don't know.
He's actually a people person.
Yeah, he is.
People first.
It's interesting, actually. I'm just trying to rack my brain now. I can't think of any scandal that's been in the tabloids of the last 30 years involving Richard Branson.
No, I can't. At all.
Maybe he paid them all off.
No, but we didn't uncover it. He would have had to say it in this book. Also, I've Googled him and everything, and there's nothing. But what he was at school was dyslexic, but that word didn't even exist then.
Yeah.
So if you couldn't work out what was going on, you were just stupid, and they just thought he was stupid. And he just said, I'd look at everything, and it was all jumbled up, couldn't understand any of it. And so he got really into sports, and then he got a sporting injury. Then he buried himself in the library. And that's where he made some good friends that sort of stayed with him. He really does make friends and keep them and get them involved, doesn't he?
Yeah.
All the way.
Yeah, I was surprised at that. A boy who's dyslexic and then is brilliant at sports and winning trophies, then can't do it, and then goes to the library. With just a minute ago he said he was dyslexic, but now he's turning into a good writer, and he writes a short story which wins a competition.
Yeah, I know.
And then he says all of a sudden he's really good at writing and stuff.
Yeah, do you know what he was writing? Porn. He was writing porn.
That'll get you into it.
Yeah, so he was interested in what he was writing. And also by then he was at another school because he'd got kicked out of the first one for having a little fling with the headmaster's daughter, which is never a brilliant idea.
So him with this friend that he met in the library, he's also another entrepreneurial spirit. He's from London. And they kind of hatch out these little business plans. They just want to make some money, and they decide to start a Christmas tree farm.
Yeah.
And they plan it. So in Easter, they got some ground from the local farm and they planted 400 seeds. They worked out if they all grow to Christmas tree size, they can sell them for £2, and they could turn 400 seeds into £800. But what they hadn't bargained on was that all the rabbits would come and strip all the seedlings. So they didn't make any Christmas trees. But then they had the idea they'd go and shoot the rabbits and skin them and sell them to a butcher. So, he's adapting his business already. This proves he's going to be successful. If something wrong happens in business, you don't give up. You just go down another avenue.
Yes.
So they didn't make much money from selling rabbits to butchers, but it was a start.
Yeah.
And then they had the idea of breeding budgies. And they got 2 budgies and they got them together. And then, it worked.
It worked. They made loads of budgies.
Yeah, the dad built them in Avery. But it got out of control, and he says they overestimated the local demand for budgies. Everybody in Shamley Green had 2 budgies, and they still had loads left over. I just think this is really interesting that they're into business and they want to make money. They do not take the easy route.
Yeah, you're right.
They don't just think, oh, we'll get a paper round.
Yeah.
Just like they're breeding budgies and shooting rabbits.
Yeah, it's really creative.
Yeah. So they're kind of making their way in the outside world while they're still at school. And of course, then when they go back to school, it's so regimented and stuff that they want to make changes to the infrastructure and the, this horrible system that the boys have amongst each other.
Basically, he was so fed up with the bullying. Well, that was called fagging at the time. It's just basically a system where the older boys treat the younger ones like servants and make them do horrendous things. Like, I know, it was Roald Dahl said that he had to sit the outside toilets in the January, when they're frozen stiff. The boys would make you go and sit on them for 10 minutes so they warm them up for them. Things like that. That's institutionalised. He was so angry about it that he decided to change it, wrote a lot of letters to people, and then thought, right, and then they suggested he starts a magazine to bring up these issues. Well, it occurs to me that literally the seeds are sown, literally, at this point, because when he's fighting British Airways, who are trying to bully him, it's exactly the same as trying to stop these bullies at school. It's just those bloody public school boys grown up trying to bully the seemingly weaker ones. And I think that's class war, actually, because he isn't upper class. He's probably lower upper class or upper middle class. I think it's a class war, and it's about the posh ones trying to keep power.
Yeah, I hadn't made that connection. That's really astute comparison.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, even when they're at that school, they're trying to change it.
Yeah. So he's always trying to change things.
Yeah, and then the headmaster says to him, well, you need to write something in the school newspaper. But the school newspaper is called The Stoic, and he says it very much is that. It's very boring and regimented in the old school. And of course, him and his friend want to bring them into the 1960s. And so they get the idea of hatching their own newspaper.
Yes, exactly. And then they realise, actually, they could join together with all the other schools. And then they think, actually, we could publish it and put it out in newsagents and make it a national paper talking about these issues. And so they call it Student. And they wrote to advertisers. They wrote about 250 letters to the biggest companies, like trying to sell advertising space at 15 years old for a paper that didn't even exist yet.
Yeah. He said his voice had broken early, so people didn't realise they were talking to a 15-year-old schoolboy.
Speaking to a kid. Yeah, it's amazing. But they got one cheque for 250 quid and they were off.
Yeah.
And then they got Gerald Scarfe, and he's the bloke who illustrated Pink Floyd's The Wall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that bloke. And he drew them a cartoon for the cover and did them an interview, and then they were really off.
Yeah.
I reckon as well they'd have been well connected. I thought about this. Well, his mate from school was called Johnny Gems. And his mum was a playwright, Pam Gems. She would have been mates with all the actors and that whole cool crowd. And them getting Vanessa Redgrave to do an interview, I guarantee would be from his mum. So I just think they was just probably quite well connected.
Gosh, and they lived in Connaught Square, so they were all right, that family.
Yes.
But their house had a big basement in Connaught Square, so they started running the paper from there. And the first issue was published in January 1968. And once Vanessa Redgrave and, of course, Gerald Scarfe were involved, then it was a lot easier to get other people interviewed. And they got David Hockney and Jean-Paul Sartre.
Mick Jagger, John Lennon. And anyway, they were doing really well. He had other people that would tell him who's cool. And then he went to make the calls to get them to do the interview. And he said he would never take no for an answer. But he wasn't really the one who knew who was cool. He was always more the businessman.
Already, so the student newspaper is successful, and already Richard Branson thinks, I don't want student just to be a noun, just to be a newspaper. I want it to be an adjective. And he's thinking of other things already that can be called student.
Yeah.
So the student advisory service, and he even goes bigger, thinking we could have student trains because students want to use trains. So already at the age of 16, he's thinking big and how he can branch out.
Yeah, you see, say student airways, and they all thought he was insane.
Yeah.
And it's funny reading that when you know what he achieved, isn't it?
Definitely.
But it's funny because he said that everyone's getting wrecked every single night because they were paying themselves £20 a week. But he said he always didn't get as wrecked as everyone because he always had this sense of responsibility and he had to keep his head straight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was always going to rise up, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Like a balloon.
Like a balloon. He said he also noticed when everybody was hanging out just how much everybody was into music.
Yes.
And he said that he knew that all of his friends wouldn't spend like 40 shillings on a meal, but they wouldn't hesitate to spend 40 shillings on an album that they wanted.
Yes.
So that actually got his brain going into thinking of how he could sell records.
And it was right when the student magazine was just on its last legs, their last actual publication. They added a bit at the end saying, if anyone's interested in mail order of records, send in your money. And they were flooded. And that's when they were like, oh, wow. So they got their first load of orders from their last student magazine publication, and that set them on their way to becoming a mail order record business.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it almost accidentally happened, basically, didn't it?
Yeah,
it was never a plan.
It did. It's just like another one of his ideas, like budgie breathing with Christmas trees. He kind of thought, okay, let's try this.
But this one took off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it did take off. It makes me wonder, he doesn't mention that anybody else was selling records by mail before, but I think they kind of did in the 60s and stuff. Maybe not the kind of music that students were listening to, like Tangerine Dream and Bob Dylan.
That's it. He says the music buying experience was really boring. You went in W.H. Smith's or John Menzies or those shops.
That's right.
And nobody wanted you in there. Everyone was looking down their nose or thinking you're going to nick something and just selling the mainstream stuff. And it wasn't a fun experience. So they were like, well, let's find all the different stuff, the underground stuff. And then there was a post office strike for 6 months, which nearly shut them down. So they're like, right, we need to open a shop. So if it wasn't for that post office strike, you wonder, don't you, if they've ever had the idea to even open a shop.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Or the mail order business could have become the biggest business in the world.
Yeah, but the sound of this shop is so cool, isn't it? There's a picture in the book of it. There's like a rainbow painted on the window and there's cushions in the window with some hippie types hanging out and they're sitting on beanbags, smoking weed, listening to music. There's coffees being sold. It becomes a place to hang out.
Again, he's like subverting the industry.
Yeah.
He's not just opening a record shop, he's delivering a whole new experience when buying a record.
Yes, because that's what people wanted. Their generation wanted that. And it's really cool. And then after a while, he realises actually where the money is that if we could be the recording studio that actually made the records.
Yes.
There's like going backwards, we could sign people, make the records, distribute the records, publish them, do the artwork, everything.
Again, this is like he's not just thinking, oh, we need a recording studio. He's kind of thinking, well, the recording studios at the moment are really formal. You have to book in your slot, and sometimes if the only available slot is 9 o'clock in the morning, you have to go. You can't sit around and wait for the muse to strike. You have to go when there's a slot. So he's actually thinking, wouldn't it be better if there was some kind of country house that I could convert into a recording studio so people could come and stay for 2 weeks and just hang out and then record? Yeah. So again, he's not just thinking we'll open a recording studio. He's changing the face of recording studios.
Yes.
And he's, what is he? Is he 20 at this point? I mean, he's still a kid, really.
At that point, it was 1971.
So he's 21.
Yeah, he's 21. And he ended up buying a £30,000, 15-bedroom manor house in North Oxfordshire.
I mean, who does that?
Nobody does that. He does that.
I'm blown away that a 21-year-old made this happen.
Me too.
They obviously had some money from the success of the shop and the mail order business. His Auntie Joyce actually stepped up and she remortgaged her house for like the last $7,500. So, his family are very supportive of him.
Yes, they are. Yeah, it was 30 grand. He got a 20 grand mortgage and borrowed 7.5 grand off his aunt. So they only had 2.5 grand of their own money. So with 2.5 grand, he decided to buy a 30 grand house. And it still had to be done up and turned into a studio. So that's massively ambitious.
Yeah.
It's way beyond your means. But it works. What I get from this book as well is that what he has is he's got this like adrenaline addiction to sort of danger or challenges. He gets just as much a buzz from risking his life sailing across storms, riding a balloon across the bloody world. All of these you could die, or getting massively in debt with a very risky business and then coming through it. It's the same feeling. It's like this addiction to danger, whether it's business danger or real danger. He loves the thrill of it.
But at the same time, he also has an enormous confidence and self-belief in himself because he really overreaches. He gets himself into these massive commitments.
Yeah.
And then he kind of, not always delivers, but most of the time he delivers.
He does. There will, again, be tons of people who have the same character whose books we will never read because they're either in jail or have killed themselves.
Yeah.
Because they fucked it up.
Yeah.
And he just got away with it. He should be dead as well for some of the adventures he's had.
Yeah.
He could easily be bankrupt. It's by the skin of his teeth, isn't it, really?
Yeah, no,
Half the
absolutely.
time.
Well, you know what? At the time that he overstretches and buys this big property, the mail order company isn't doing so well. And then he realises that they actually are £15,000 overdrawn. But at the same time, he's beginning to export records to France and he's driving them down in a van to the border, whatever. But if you're exporting stuff, you don't pay the sales tax in England. And then one of the vans got rejected and he had a van full of records. And as he was driving it back, he thought, oh, damn it, we've got these cheaper because I haven't paid the sales tax. If I feed them back through our record shop and the mail order company, I'm going to make £5,000 more than I would if I'd bought them for sale in England. So what he did, they were £15,000 overdrawn. He thought, I only need to do 3 van loads and I've got our money back. This is a highly illegal practice.
Yeah.
But he takes the risk. And he does it, but what he didn't know, the records that were produced for export had a little stamp on the label. I think it was, what do you call it? Not invisible ink. It only shines ultraviolet. There you go.
Yeah, but he did this 3 times as well, didn't he? He went and made this journey 2 more times.
Yeah, somebody within the customs office tipped off Richard Branson and they managed to get most of the records out of the shop before they were raided, but actually they did get caught out. And he got done for selling records in England, which were meant for export. And he went to court and got fined £45,000, which was 3 times the profit.
Yeah, it was 3 times the profit. Yeah.
But it was then that he vowed that he would never, ever knowingly do anything illegal in business anymore. So he says it was a really hard lesson to learn. I think he's still young. I think he's allowed to make mistakes. It seems like a simple mistake.
I can't help thinking it's a white privileged man's get out.
Okay.
Because if he paid the money back, he'd have no record, right? If he didn't, it would have gone to trial. I can't help but think if somebody else might have just got thrown in jail.
Right,
because he's literally got no criminal record from being a total and utter criminal, right? So he managed to pay the money, but it just makes you wonder, you know.
Yeah.
Some people get thrown in jail for having a spliff on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just feels a bit... I think it's their connections and stuff, you know. People pull strings. It has to be.
And he comes from 3 generations of lawyers.
Exactly. I'm happy for him, but I can't help feeling the law is a... He said that there's nothing like the motivation of staying out of jail to make everyone work really hard to get this money, because his other pals all knew it could have been them on trial, and it wasn't. It was him who took the hit. So they all worked their asses off. Nick, his old mate from home, his job then was to open shops, and he just opened it back. They opened 14 within the year.
No, sorry, but this is something I don't get. It's like he's all of a sudden got a £45,000 bill to pay because he's done illegal activity. Yes. And their response to that is, oh, let's open up 14 record shops. It's an amazing brain that thinks to pay that back, we need to spend more money to open more shops to make that money back.
Yeah, you got to expand. Well, obviously they made money in the shops then. And he said that they'd always guarantee they got the first 3 months' rent for free. I don't know how, but they did. Yeah. So they were just making pure profit in that first 3 months. Then they'd open another shop and they get that for free. Then the record sales paid the month's rent on the last one. And that's what they kept doing. It just was working. And then the other bloke, Simon, who was his cousin from South Africa, who was a music nut, he came along and he really helped to shape Virgin, and he made all the choices of the US imports and stuff. So he really got it becoming the coolest place. Like he said, absolutely no Donny Osmond. We cannot sell anything mainstream. If we keep it all cool, we will build our brand and we will become the coolest place to go. And it totally worked. Did
you know that all this was happening in 1972? I think of Virgin as a company born in the 1980s. But this is right at the beginning of the 1970s, the Virgin record shops.
Yeah. That's true, but they look like really amateur shops. They've got like posters in the window and rainbows painted, you know. When you actually see in the book, they show you the original shops and then the current Virgin megastores. It's laughably amateur looking, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
It's just before it became really commercial. It's nice.
You know, the record companies didn't like him because he was selling discounted records. The old school, like John Menzies and Woolworths, who were selling records up to that point, took issue with Virgin Records and they complained to the record companies. So a lot of them didn't actually supply Virgin with records. So they had this friend who had a tiny independent record shop called Raymond Records.
Oh, yeah.
And he would order the stock for the Virgin shops, but as the shops expanded, this tiny shop got van loads of records.
It's like lorries all turning up to load
this tiny
up
shop, and then they had to send vans down to pick them up.
Yeah.
So the shop, they have shops in all the major cities and stuff, and now he has a recording studio. And then he thought, right, the one thing we actually need is a record label. And so they created Virgin Records. So they have the shops, now they have the studios, and now they have the label, which means if they're making the records and selling them through the shops, I mean, they're making money at every stage of the recording. But it's quite genius, really.
What really turned them around was they were recording a few artists, and then this bloke who was like the third reserve guitarist and the musical Hair, and his sister who used to sing in pubs, they were hanging about because he was doing session guitarist work, and chatted to the studio blokes and said, actually, I got my own music. And so they signed this bloke, and he said, okay, they said, you can move into the manor house, live in one of the rooms, and just do your music, and we'll put it out. And he's like, okay, well, you'll have to rent me some instruments. And I'm like, we'll buy them. He actually puts the shopping list of instruments in the book, doesn't he? Picture of it. And one of them's tubular bells and 20 other instruments. It took him about a year to record. It's made like over 2,000 recordings. And then they released Tubular Bells in 1973. Signed this bloke who was called Mike Oldfield. Nobody would play it because it was like long plays, like 45 minutes long for one side. So he invited John Peel to his houseboat, very cool, and played him the full thing. And John Peel loved it. And then that week played it in full on his radio show, which nobody ever would do. But it just became cult. And it made them. They were basically, between then and 77, when they signed the Sex Pistols, they were like a whole record company funded by Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, weren't they?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
It was just that literally funded everything. They also signed the Human League, but the Human League didn't make any money until their third album. So they would do things like that. But it took them a while to really get going with that stuff, didn't it? Mike Oldfield's second album was number one as well, so yeah.
No, after reading this book, I only know Mike Oldfield for Tubular Bells.
Yeah.
Gosh, he really did. All through like the 70s, he was releasing albums and they were selling by the truckload. So yeah, Virgin Records for like the first 10 years was completely subsidised by Mike Oldfield.
Totally, they're a one-act business.
Yeah.
Apart from, the Sex Pistols in 1977, but they didn't survive much longer after. I think they had God Save the Queen was a hit with them. They didn't last probably within the year, did they?
Yeah, no, they didn't.
But that still made them look really cool in the industry to other artists.
Yeah, and he was absolutely hell-bent on signing the Rolling Stones. And also what is amazing about this is that the bidding went up to £4 million and nobody thought this young man who had Virgin Records could raise it. But at this point, he managed to raise £4 million.
Yeah.
I mean, he's so utterly resourceful. It's incredible.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
But right at the last minute, EMI came in with £5 million and they got the Rolling Stones. So.
Yes, damn it. Oh, they had so many near misses.
Yeah, they really did.
But yeah, I know, he's so confident. But it's like we say, he has a danger element. Most of us would be too worried to have that sort of debt, but he gets a buzz out of it. He totally, constantly gets a buzz out of doing unlikely to survive, things.
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, like Mike Oldfield, they would never have thought that would have gone on to sell millions and millions of copies. It was just so abstract.
Yes.
It was prog rock. I know prog rock was a thing, but prog rock wasn't selling millions of albums.
No.
And yet they signed Mike Oldfield and all of a sudden I don't think anybody expected that success.
No. I mean, they knew it was amazing, but they certainly did not expect. Nobody expected it, yeah. Then he did cool things. Another very risky business deal was signing the drummer from Genesis.
I knew you'd love this.
Because drummers, they never become successful on their own. So, yeah, Phil Collins, that was a big hit. That was 1978, 79, around there. And then he bought, that's amazing as well, he bought Kensington Roof Gardens and Heaven, the nightclub, the gay, legendary nightclub Heaven. I never knew he owned that.
No, I had no idea either.
I did mean to look up if he still does, actually, but I forgot. But that's amazing.
What I find interesting about him is that, especially with Virgin Records, is that the two acts which really blew up, I think were probably two acts that he thought would sell reasonably well. Like, whoever would have thought, actually, that the drummer for Genesis would end up outselling Genesis?
Yeah.
I mean, he became an international, multi-million platinum artist. I don't think they had that expectation. In fact, I think they said if only 10% of Genesis fans buy the records by Phil Collins, we'd have made our money back. So it didn't seem like such a big risk.
But they did have to do those calculations before they signed him, because they really didn't think that he was a very good, safe bet.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Okay, so 1981, they'd already got those successes, but then it all started rolling in, like OMD, Japan. This is like the new wave of music in the 80s. OMD, Japan, XTC.
Yeah.
China Crisis, Simple Minds, The Human League were huge. And then Culture Club.
Well, they hit
gold.
Hit gold with Boy George, didn't they?
Gold with Boy George.
I think that's almost like the repeat of Mike Oldfield. They said in the 80s, 40% of Virgin revenue came from Culture Club.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Because they were worldwide, weren't they?
Yeah, 1982, the White Boy happened, Stiffed. I'm Afraid of Me came out, Stiffed. Do You Really Want to Hurt Me? Then they got on Top of the Pops and they were off.
Yeah.
And that's their first album, Kissing to Be Clever. The second album was Colour by Numbers with Come a Chameleon on it. Yeah. That sold 10 million. Yeah, it's worldwide.
It is. And then you kind of think, oh, with this money, this obscene amount of money this man is making, then it enables him to go and do things like start Virgin Airlines and stuff.
Yeah.
He's not like a one-man band. He's like, honestly, he's just has so many different industries that he's expanding into.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there was obviously some tax incentive for them to make films, so he got into that.
Yeah.
They made, I had no idea, Electric Dreams. And so obviously Phil Oakey, who was already from their band, The Human League, sang Electric Dreams. So they could put that on one of their own films and sell twice. And then 1984, the film with Richard Burton and John Hurt, and they got Eurythmics to put the music on that. And then Absolute Beginners was them as well. It's incredible. Had no idea.
Yeah. I had no idea. It's funny because you think Virgin is omnipresent. Especially in the UK, you think you know everything. Yeah. And actually you don't. They even had Virgin Book Publishing and stuff where they would release loads of rock and pop autobiographies and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you think we would know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Oh my God, this book it's in many parts in ways because there's so much that happens. So yeah, his venture into starting Virgin Airways is mad because you think, how can you be so confident to hire aeroplanes? Think you can do that.
Well, I love that. Was very organic how that started. He's in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, him and his future wife.
Well, they went out to look at Necker Island, wouldn't they?
Oh, yeah.
That's another thing. This precocious 23-year-old buying an island.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, well, that's interesting because I always knew he owned his own island, which is in the Virgin Islands, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, you start wondering if the islands are named after him rather than the other way around, don't you? But, they just thought it'd be funny to go there because it was Virgin. And then they find this island. They actually are on holiday thinking, we'll pretend we want to buy an island because then we'll get flown everywhere and shown all these amazing places. So they're just scamming people. And this island is actually for sale, 3 million. And it looks stunning. I've nosed around it loads online. It's amazing. Your own island and it's wilderness on it and nature and just, oh my God, it's unbelievable. And he offered 180,000 for it and they wanted 3 million for it. So it's laughable. It's laughable. Obviously, they're not going to sell it to him. Next thing you know, the bloke wants a quick sale. He sold it him for 180 grand.
Yeah.
That's what my flat's worth. He bought a whole island for what my flat's worth. That's unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, good grief.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but you know what?
Lucky bastard.
He's creating these opportunities for himself, though.
He is.
He's going out there. He's making the ridiculous offers.
Yeah.
You make your own luck in life, and he's certainly doing that.
I know.
But I love that they were out at a place called Beef Island to finish off that holiday, and then they were waiting to catch a flight to Puerto Rico, and it got cancelled. So the airport is just full of people wanting to go to Puerto Rico and they can't. So young Richard Branson makes a couple of phone calls and he charters a private plane. He gets a blackboard and he writes on it Virgin flights going to Puerto Rico, and all of a sudden he sells every seat out. And he said that's the first unofficial Virgin Airlines flight. But I mean, who else would have been sat in that airport thinking, oh, all these people want to go where I want to go. Let's just privately charter a plane.
Yeah, I know. The confidence of the man is absolutely brilliant. So in his mind, that's all he's doing, just on a bigger scale. And they only have 4 planes for the first about 8 years. They've got 4 planes.
Hey, do you know what? I was amazed at that. And so I Googled how many planes do Virgin Airways have now. Do you know how many they have now?
No idea.
41.
Is that? Oh, wow.
So I still don't think that's that many.
Doesn't seem like that many.
And then I thought, is that normal? And so I Googled how many British Airways have, and they have 540.
Oh, wow. So they're still relatively small.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? Wow. Well, with only 4 planes, they went from London to New York and London to Miami. I think that's all they had. And they had to go out of Gatwick. So the whole fight was to get a slot going out from Heathrow because it's a better slot. But, oh my God, then the battle starts with British Airways, who just wanted to squash them.
Oh my God, it's so shocking.
Yeah, they just wanted to squash the competition. And there are laws against that, but they couldn't prove it because it was so underhand. And it was the head of BA is called Lord King.
Yes.
Lord King. I mean, that's pomposity itself, isn't it? Lord King. How many titles can you have?
Definitely a public school boy. He definitely had somebody warming up his toilet seat, I can
Yes,
guarantee
he did. Yes. Yeah, and they hid it really well, the battle, which was so underhand. He talks about it quite a lot in the book, but it's never boring. I find this book a page turner. It's like a thriller. And, he ends up getting, wires and doing secret meetings and recording people, and it's kind of exciting. But yeah, he beats them in the end because they totally denied all their underhand action, which there's loads of it.
I mean, I was really surprised that they even did this, and I didn't know how they did this. It's just dirty tricks. I mean, British Airways would have people waiting at Heathrow, and when people turned up for their Virgin flights, they would try and seduce them over to British Airways. I don't even know how that works. I mean, once you paid for a flight, you can't transfer it.
No, I know.
Unless they offered them a free flight on British Airways in the hope that they would get repeat custom from them.
I think you probably can transfer your flight, because if you miss a flight, sometimes you can get taken on other airlines if there's one going. And then they'd also phone people up.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
and actually say your flight's been cancelled, we can rebook you onto British Airways. And they go, oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And they do that, but they were hacking into the computer system to do that. So, I mean, it was really illegal and really bad. There's loads of stuff they did. They were undermining him in the press.
Yeah.
They were saying Virgin didn't have the money to pay their fuel bills, so their shares were falling, because they'd gone public by this point. They had shares. They were saying there was drugs at Heaven, and that was owned by Richard Branson, and it was all dodgy. Hey, now, do you remember our old housemate used to work for Virgin, and she said that it was just really wild?
Do you know something that's just occurred to me?
What?
I used to work for Virgin.
Shut up. How's that only just occurred to you?
I've only just remembered.
What?
I've only just remembered.
Stop it.
I did. I was a staff trainer back in the 1990s. I started off in our price. It got taken over by Virgin.
Oh.
So I ended up working at a Virgin head office. And I've only just remembered, but I used to be out on the road all the time training people. And do you know what? Richard Branson, one year, gave everybody a bottle of champagne for Christmas with their name on.
That's amazing.
But he sent it to the shop I used to work in. And when I went to pick it up, they drunk it.
Get lost.
And I said, well, I want the bottle. I want the bottle because it's got my name on it, and they've thrown it out.
No!
Yeah, I remember being really upset about it because it's just like, wow, I want my bottle of champagne from Richard Branson.
Oh my God! The bastards, that's absolutely wrong.
How weird that I can read this whole book and...
How weird that you've only just remembered that Richard Branson gave you a personalised bottle of champagne and you forgot whilst reading this book. But I tell you what else he says. He absolutely loved throwing parties, and that manor house was ripe for it. But I also used to live towards Heathrow and go out to bars and clubs. They were always the people who worked for the airlines there, cabin crew and stuff. They were always out partying. And they always used to just be totally enamoured with Virgin and love Richard Branson, just talk it up. It's the best place to work. He's so amazing. He throws parties for us every year, and he'll have a whole week of parties every day in a row, so that every single person has been to his house to a party. And he commands so much emotional, personal loyalty from every single person who works for him. And he says that in this book because when he's forced to sell Virgin Music to basically bail out all his other businesses, it came down to something had to go. So he had to sell Virgin Music for $1 billion. But he didn't want to do it because he said it was like his child. And when he did it, he was weeping. He had to run away from the party weeping because he really cares for his staff and people. It's nice. You just get such a good vibe from him. And I can vouch for it personally by all those happy cabin crew that I met. Yeah.
And of course, they get to wear the best airline uniforms.
Yes, the coolest. They look so good. They look so good.
Were they by Vivienne Westwood?
It was.
Did we read about that in her book?
Yes. It was her, wasn't it?
Yeah, amazing. So how cool did you get to wear Vivienne Westwood at work?
Cool as hell. Of course, he signed the Sex Pistols in 1977 with Malcolm McLaren, and he totally was friends with Vivienne Westwood. In fact, the crossover, that when they all went on the boat up past Parliament and they sang God Save the Queen outside, and it made the news, and the police boat came along and arrested them all. Richard Branson was on that boat.
Oh, yes.
It's like actual crossover, and so was Vivienne Westwood. They were old pals.
Yeah, right.
When she designed that uniform, I couldn't even imagine they knew each other,
Yeah. He only had to sell Virgin for $1 billion because of what British Airways did to him.
Yes, because of how much they undermined him in business, yeah. And that he needed to restore faith in the business. And how much it was worth.
It didn't really damage British Airways, though,
no.
did it? You would think that dirty tricks all being exposed. I guess, they're such part of the establishment. People like that never really lose, do they?
No, because they were absolved. Well, they had to admit they were liable and pay, but they managed to say that none of the directors of BA knew it was going on.
Right.
So that was the little clause in it that saved their skin. But, unless you bother reading Richard Branson's book, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So, the bastards.
Gosh, do you know what? We're really running out of time, and he's still got so much to do.
I know.
We haven't even talked about him going up in the balloons.
No, let's just briefly say this. Whilst it's an amazing book about business, and it literally is a page-turner of business, because it's so exciting. The way he describes it is so exciting. Just the business. This book is interspersed with these most unbelievable adventures, whether it's in a boat, the boat sinks and they have to get rescued, or they're in a balloon and the blooming fuel drops off and they're trying to get across the Atlantic Ocean with a dangling vertical balloon pod and the bloody balloon's on fire and you've got to put it out, and they jump in the sea, the bloke probably drowned. It's absolutely nail-biting stuff, isn't it? It's so... It literally flips from business to adventure to business back to adventure.
Epic.
Yeah, it's James Bond. Exciting, this book.
It really is. I feel like we're selling him short, obviously, because we only have like an hour to do this, when we've not even talked about it, but we could literally do a whole hour on Richard Branson's adventures.
Easily. I got so into the ballooning thing. Yeah, and I actually now understand how a balloon works, and the fact that, like, when they didn't have the fuel, they calculated they had to go at a certain speed, otherwise they would run out of fuel and drop down into the ocean. So they had to get on jet streams, and the jet streams were at a certain height.
Yeah.
And they had to literally navigate from one jet stream to another. That would take them there at the right speed so they'd make it over land before their fuel ran out. I actually understand it now, ballooning. Plus, he took Janet Jackson on a balloon ride from London to Oxford, and that is just brilliant. It's so cool.
Well, the signing of Janet Jackson actually really helped the whole Virgin brand, because at that point, it was in the news that Virgin was a dying concern. And he was very, very certain that he wanted to sign Janet Jackson, and this bidding war started. And all of a sudden, I think £15 million to begin with, and other record companies bumped it up to 20 million. And then he said, do you know what? All of these other companies are trying to tie Janet in for at least 3 albums. I'm going to offer her £25 million just for one album. And then when she works with us, she will just want to stay.
Yeah.
And so he signed her £25 million for one album. What was the masterstroke about that is that went into all of the newspapers. Then all the people who thought Virgin were dying thought, well, they can't be. They've just paid £25 million for Janet Jackson.
Exactly.
Nobody knew that he didn't have £25 million and he had to work really hard.
Didn't even have it.
He worked really hard to get it together to pay Janet.
Oh, my God, he really did.
Again, that's not just about signing Janet. That's about saving the brand as a whole. It's so clever, actually.
Yeah. And then they managed to sign the Rolling Stones. And,
yeah, they finally got the Rolling Stones.
I mean, the rest is history. I mean, you've got Virgin, banks, Virgin Cola, Virgin Rail, Virgin Direct, which is life insurance, Virgin Cinemas, Virgin Radio, Virgin Music.
Hey, it even said in the 80s there was Virgin Pubs. Did you know about Virgin Pubs?
Didn't know about that. And to be honest, yeah, this book was published in 1999. So, I mean, 25 more years. I mean, I only know about Virgin Galactic from Googling it, but I don't know what else he's
a Virgin Mobile. He does
Virgin
all the
Mobile.
cell phones.
Yeah, I think he probably rules the world. He's worth $3 billion approximately, but then you can't calculate that. It's probably got, you no idea really what he's actually. Oh, what's so great though is once he sold Virgin Music for $1 billion, is that they didn't have to rely on bank loans anymore because they had enough money that they could loan themselves money for projects. And they didn't have to worry about paying it back. They just had, when you've got that much money to float, then you're really off, aren't you? And that's why he took off from that point.
Took off.
Just
one thing that I want to thank Richard Branson for.
Yes.
I didn't know that he was responsible for putting the individual seat-back video screens in economy class on the aeroplanes.
Yes, thanks, Richard Branson.
And the way he did that was because the quote that he got was something like 10 million to install them on the back of the seats. And then he thought, do you know what? He got the head honcho at Airbus and said, if I buy 18 new aeroplanes, will you fit these screens in for free? And he said, okay, I will. And he said it was actually easier to raise £4 billion to buy 18 new aeroplanes than it was to raise £10 million to convert them all to put the screens on the back.
Amazing.
So actually, again, like how he revolutionised record shops and recording studios. Actually, he did revolutionise air travel in that we all get to watch what we want on the back of the seat. That was him. Yeah,
he made economy travel is probably on a par with what first class travel used to be.
Well, debatable. You still have to sit next to riffraff, darling.
Riffraff. I wonder if they ever have crying babies in first class.
Oh, probably.
Probably not. They probably give them champagne and knock them out.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what an absolute high achiever. And that might be an understatement.
Hey, sorry, another thing that I'm really surprised about. I know we got to finish. When Lady Diana died, he said, it would be a really good idea if Elton John sung Candle in the Wind, but actually it would be good if he could change the lyrics. And then he said it would be really good if he could sing that at the funeral. And it sounds like Richard Branson organised Elton John to sing at Diana's funeral. Why would he even have the power or the contacts to make that happen?
I don't know. They're probably good pals, though. Just because, you're in that circle.
Yeah. And then also, you know what also we're not talking about is just how much he not interferes, but how much he gets involved in like world conflict with Saddam Hussein and Nelson Mandela, and he's flying out planes to pick up hostages. And
oh yeah, we haven't even mentioned that one.
He's sending out planes to rescue hostages. This book, honestly, I was totally blown away. We've got to stop talking about it. Everybody should read this book. I
know. It's amazing, isn't it? It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, he really is.
Who'd have thought a business autobiography is a page turner?
I know. Well, we kind of read Alan Sugar, and that was.
Yeah, he's not as exciting a man. Let's face it.
He never flew a balloon, did he?
No, he never did anything really outside of business
and football.
I don't think his feet ever left the ground.
Yeah.
No, you can't compare them. I love that book, but this is so exciting. He's such a wild card.
Just all of his achievements, all of his adventures. I mean, his life is just completely. It's utterly ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's Virgin on the ridiculous. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Thrift Shop Biography. We love making this podcast, and we're absolutely thrilled that so many of you are already listening. You could really help us out by leaving us a review somewhere, wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you could share us, tell your friends about us, or drop some links on social media. We have a Facebook page called Thrift Shop Biography, so make sure you come over there to hear about the episodes first and what else we're up to. Okay, see you next week. And if you're new here, there are loads more episodes now to go and listen in the back catalogue, so make sure you go and enjoy them. Okay, thank you very much.